There's a man in the Bible who appears for 3 verses, performs something that should not even be possible for him, and then disappears like he was never there. No origin story, no genealogy, no son of, no explanation. And then, centuries later, the Bible starts treating him like he's not just a footnote, but a key. Because Hebrews takes this random figure from Genesis and basically says, if you don't understand him, you won't understand Jesus's priesthood. And that's what we're doing today. We're going to trace every major appearance of Melchizedek in Scripture. Genesis 14, Psalm 110, Hebrews 7, and then we're going to step into Jesus's world, including looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls, because that's where things are going to get honestly unsettling. And by the end, you'll see why this might not just be a simple question of was he human or was he divine, but it might be something far stranger. To understand why Melchizedek is such a big deal, you have to understand how offensive it is that he has no genealogy. The Bible is obsessed with genealogies. Genesis has entire blocks that are basically, and this person begat this person begat this person. And Matthew opens up with a genealogy before it even gets to the birth of Jesus. Because in the ancient world, your authority was not self-appointed. Your right to function legally, socially, religiously came through lineage. Priests didn't just volunteer to be priests. They were born priests. You didn't wake up one day and think, I'm going to be a priest now. That's like you walking into court and declaring yourself a Supreme Court judge. It doesn't work that way. And that's why Melchizedek seems to be a problem, because he shows up with priesthood authority without any lineage being named. So here's the scene. Abram, or I should say before he's called Abraham, had just won a war, and his nephew Lot gets kidnapped by a coalition of kings. Abram takes 318 trained men from his household, and he chases them down and wins. Abram was not just any man. He had authority and he had power, which is why he has this many men with him. Some scholars even say he might have been a sheikh. And so he comes from this background, this victory. And after this victory, he's met by 2 figures, and one is the king of Sodom, and then 2 is this other man. And Genesis 14 says, Melchizedek, king of Salem, brings out bread and wine. He is a priest of God Most High. He blesses Abram, and then Abram gives him 1/10 of everything. And then it's over. He vanishes from Scripture. Know where he went, know what happened next was. There's literally no backstory. So let's break down why this is so strange. So first of all, he's a king of Salem, and Salem is tied to peace. It's associated with what later becomes Jerusalem. So the priest king of that city becomes central in biblical worship, appears before the law, before the temple, and before Israel even exists as a nation. 2, he's a priest of God Most High, or El Elyon, and Abram recognizes that name. So this is not a pagan priesthood. This is priesthood connected to the true God. So before Israel even says, we're the people of God, Scripture shows a priesthood that's already functioning for the same God. Now this should bother you if you're reading closely. Number 3, Abram tithes to him. And in that world, you don't tithe down. So Abram is the one with the covenant promises. Abram is the one that's being called blessed and marked by God. And yet, he gives 1/10 to Melchizedek, which signals recognition or spiritual superiority. And here's another layer. The king of Sodom offers Abram spoils of war, earthly power, and earthly riches. But Abram rejects that and honors Melchizedek. Two kingdoms are standing in front of Abram: a corrupted earthly kingdom and a priest-king kingdom aligned with El Elyon. And Abram chooses which kingdom to align with. Then scripture goes silent for literally centuries. Now, if we fast forward many years, David writes Psalm 110, one of the most quoted messianic passages in the New Testament. And in it, God says to a coming figure, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." So this line should stop you, because David is from the tribe of Judah and priests are from Levi. And the Torah is clear that if you're not a Levite, you don't touch the priesthood. So when David says a coming king will also be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, he's implying a priesthood that doesn't depend on the Mosaic system, something that's older than Sinai, something that precedes Levitical regulation, something that's above the normal rules. Now let's go to Hebrews 7. So the New Testament comes and then it makes this even more intense. Hebrews is explaining how Jesus can be king and priest, even though he's not from the tribe of Levi. And the entire argument runs through Melchizedek. Hebrews describes him as without recorded father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, remaining a priest continually. And this is where people split into two camps. Some say this is just literary. Genesis doesn't mention his parents, so he's more presented as genealogy less. That's the safe reading. Others say, no, this must be a supernatural being, an angel, or even a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus himself. But there's another lens that becomes visible when you step into the world of Second Temple Judaism, which is the world of Jesus. Because the ancient world did not separate spiritual and physical like we do today. Kingship itself was spiritual. Territories were spiritual. Priests and kings weren't a novelty. They were a recognized category in the ancient Near East. And this is where renowned scholars become even more important in the conversation. Now, when we step into the time of Jesus, what Jewish people believed in the Old and New Testament, you'll find something shocking. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a text that's often labeled as 11Q Melchizedek, sometimes called the Melchizedek document. And in that worldview, Melchizedek is not just a historical king who once blessed Abraham. He's actually portrayed as a heavenly agent of judgment, liberation, and end-time victory. And he's connected to certain themes like proclaiming liberty, defeating powers of darkness, final judgment language that's actually drawn from the prophets. And this majorly matters because Hebrews wasn't just written in a vacuum. Hebrews is speaking into a world where Jewish people had developed interpretative traditions about Melchizedek that were far more cosmic than most modern sermons will ever tell you. So, when Hebrews emphasizes no genealogy, it's not ignorance. It's a signal that his authority is not anchored in earth. Genealogy is how you validate earthly priesthood. But Melchizedek's priesthood, it's anchored in something else, something more ancient. When Hebrews says Jesus is a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, it's not saying that Jesus is mysterious like Melchizedek. It's saying that Jesus operates in a priesthood that doesn't depend on human lineage because it comes from God. And that's why it can be eternal. Levitical priests die. They pass office down. But the priesthood of Jesus doesn't. It's permanent. And Melchizedek is the signpost in Genesis that tells you that God has always had a priesthood older than the system that people actually think is the beginning and the oldest. Now, historically, there are major interpretations. One is Melchizedek as Shem. So Shem is still alive during this time, so this is why people think that. 2 is Melchizedek as Christ appearing before his incarnation. And some people still hold this belief today. 3 is Melchizedek as a righteous Canaanite priest king. 4 is Melchizedek as a heavenly figure or cosmic priestly archetype. And this is what many Second Temple period Jews believed. Melchizedek is so thinly described because he's a window. Melchizedek is one of those intersections where the Bible hints that reality is far bigger than the visible realm. And here's what makes this spiritually weighty. The Bible obsessively documents bloodlines. And then in the middle of all of that, it inserts a priest king who breaks all the rules. No genealogy, no origin story, no end. It's a feature because it tells you that God's priesthood is not ultimately dependent on human systems. There's something that's older, there's something that's higher, there's something that's directly related to heaven. And Hebrews says Jesus is the fulfillment of that priesthood, which means if you want to understand authority, if you want to understand intercession, if you want to understand priesthood, you can't ignore Melchizedek. And if you want to go deeper into priesthood and the end times in scripture, subscribe, watch this video next, and I'll see you there.